Jumping right back into the action here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast, back into a little bit more of the quarterback talk, this time surrounding the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings, I think, are gonna be a very interesting case to follow over the offseason, and obviously, how this situation with their quarterbacks is gonna affect the draft and free agency, obviously, as to who they want to bring in and what kind of team they want to have in 2025, because overall I think it's quite honestly like a harsh reality when you think about it, when you think of how Minnesota got to this point where they were where they were back 3 weeks, right? When they were winning games, pushing the Lions to be the number one seed, right? In large part because of how Sam Darnold was playing during that run, and really I would say the majority of the regular season, how impressive Sam Darnold was playing, and how just so much of a just unexpected, out of left field story Sam Darnold was, right? Because this was positioned for them to kind of groom JJ McCarthy, a similar situation to like Drake May, and I guess like Michael Penix in a way as well. This was the blueprint, right? Kind of easing JJ in with a guy like Sam Darnold, but then disaster strikes. JJ gets hurt. He's out for the year, and now you got to start Sam Darnold, and he plays out of his mind. Quite frankly, nobody probably predicted him to play this well, and that was great for the Vikings, right? They were really taking advantage of this opportunity. But now that we arrive here a week after the wild card round, and I guess 2 weeks after that run of games against Detroit and against the Rams last week, a lot of people will give Sam Darnold credit for the regular season, but also will put a lot of blame on Sam Darnold with how the season ended. And that's just a harsh reality, right? It feels like I can only imagine, right? I'm assuming here for Sam Darnold, right? That everybody just forgets what you did in the regular season, and, a game or two in the playoffs, obviously, is what people remember. And I think that's not wrong, but, it just feels harsh, like I said before, right? But it is the nature of it, it is the nature of the playoffs, and where everything ultimately matters. And that's what Sam Darnold also said as well after their game, right? How he just didn't make enough plays, and nobody ultimately really cares what you do until you get to the postseason where everything matters. So what do we do now, right? What do we do now with this Vikings team with Sam Darnold, right? Does this mean that after another underwhelming season, after another disappointment and losing in the first round of the playoffs, does this mean that Sam Darnold is 100% not going to be there? I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say necessarily that they're just going to kick him out and there's no way he stays. But I do feel like they'll want they're going to want probably another team friendly deal. They're probably going to ask Sam to kind of help them out and take a much more friendly deal, right? And his value definitely certainly dropped over the last two games, right? Because when everything was on the line, when everything was out there for you to play for against this one other team, you fell short, right? And it's not just the fact that you fell short, it's how you fell short. Only scoring 9 points in back-to-back games like that is definitely something that's going to be constantly brought up in these negotiations that Sam Darnold has. So I'm sure the Vikings now, with that sort of leverage, are going to ask him to bring down the price a little bit, kind of help them out. But, kind of putting myself in Sam Darnold's shoes, right? I'm sure he might feel like the regular season and the way he did play during the regular season and making the Pro Bowl and really helping the Vikings out in a spot where when your rookie quarterback goes down, I mean, say they didn't have Sam Darnold and had anybody else, would any other quarterback maybe have that much success that Sam Darnold would have had, this year? The leverage Sam has is that you'll never know that answer, right? So he could say, without me, you might not have even gotten here, right? With any other quarterback, and if you're Sam, you try to drive up the price that way, and that's where all the numerous discussions are going to happen, right, with that sort of narrative and talking point. But we could approach a reality where Minnesota does part ways with Sam and they move on from him, and now it's really just like JJ McCarthy, and I don't even think Daniel Jones is on a contract, right? I think this was the last year of his deal, if I'm not mistaken. So now you're really just left with JJ McCarthy if Sam Darnold moves on, right? A guy they drafted 10th overall to be, the quarterback one, the starter for this team. But the issue that we now run into is whether or not going straight to JJ McCarthy right after a knee injury and really not having any experience in his first year because of that injury, is that something that they're set up to do? Is that something that's even plausible or realistic for them to kind of approach as a real alternative, right? Because what's there to say that you even come close to the year you had this year? Could it potentially be worse with a rookie quarterback with no experience? You just kind of throwing him out there. Those are the kind of things that they're going to have to kind of wrestle with. And this team is well equipped, as well as really any other team, with Justin and Jordan Addison and TJ, and even that offensive line a little bit. They really disappointed, but still, it's a solid group. Aaron Jones as well, some good pieces on the defense, and a great head coach, right? They're well equipped to compete, personnel-wise with a lot of these teams, but it's just all about the quarterback now, and it's obviously easier said than done to just fill in the quarterback, right? Everyone's trying to do that, and you can see how many teams have failed. So it must be now, ideally, for the Vikings, I think, to make sure they have that urgency, though, right? Because they do have a great team, and it might feel like, they're really set up to kind of go on a run here. But I feel like still there's got to be a bit of urgency because you are on that rookie contract right now. We mentioned it a couple segments ago, like being in this position that the Vikings are in a cheap quarterback deal with the kind of pieces that they have is one of the best spots to be in. And, if you don't decide to pay Sam Darnold and don't decide to go that way, and you could even go even cheaper, then right now we start thinking of other possibilities with this team. If you don't want to keep Sam and you decide that maybe his asking price is a little bit too high, but maybe you're not really ready to go to JJ yet, you look at other options out there, right? Maybe a guy like, Daniel Jones, right? I'm assuming he's on the last year of his deal. That thought is escaping me. But if he is on the last year of his deal and he is going to be a free agent, you could go after him as a cheap option, as a, bridge quarterback. And, there's other guys like Jimmy Garoppolo is another one that has experience now being a backup, with the Rams, has connections with the Vikings general manager from their time in San Francisco. So Jimmy's another guy that's played in a lot of big games. He has that sort of mentorship about him that JJ can sort of benefit off of. Or even a guy like Trey Lance, I saw somewhere in an article where while Trey Lance was still in San Francisco, the Vikings were one of the teams that were interested in bringing him on before the Cowboys obviously eventually traded for him. But, if they decide to part ways with Sam Darnold, I think those three guys would be a couple great candidates for them to be just a bridge quarterback, right? Ideally, you would go into this season thinking the same way you did last offseason, where you were bringing in Sam to be this bridge quarterback, and he, blew all the expectations out of the water. So you would ideally be doing that same thing while still, having JJ come along and kind of ease him in. Because the reality is that, JJ, I like JJ McCarthy. I think he's going to be a great quarterback. I think he's going to be right in there with Bo and Michael Penix now, certainly. Jaden Daniels, I think that would be asking a lot, but I mean, who knows, right? I think he's going to be very talented, a very talented player for this team, right? He has a lot of big game experience. He has that leadership aspect about him, and he was just in a good professional program at Michigan. But coming off of an injury like that, you just don't want to throw him in, right? So I think the ideal scenario for me on what this quarterback situation could look like is I would make the hard decision of moving on from Sam, unless he's taking a very friendly deal. I think I'm just parting ways with that and going after one of these other cheaper options, and that way, I I kind of let JJ know that this is this could be a quarterback competition of some sorts, right? Much like it was this offseason, right? And I'd let him know that that's still the goal. It's still the goal to kind of have him move along and things like that, and see where he's at, after the preseason, after training camp and everything like that. And if he wins the job, that's great, right? If they feel like he can start right away, that's great, but there's no reason why they should rush him. So I feel like bringing on a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo or, Daniel Jones, right? They're good enough to do a decent enough job with this kind of roster. They're going to be fine, right? To kind of be like a Marcus Mariota or Kirk Cousins, just definitely not as expensive. Jacoby Brissett, those kind of guys, right? I feel like the Vikings could take that approach in 2025 if I was making the decisions, right? Obviously, but yeah, I mean, like, it seemed like they were very fond of Sam Darnold, so that's kind of also another reason why it might not just be like we're just gonna move on from him. It looked like they had a really good relationship going there, so I'm sure that's gonna play a part in it, but we'll see, right? We're just at the beginning of this entire thing, so we'll keep an eye on that as we move along. But the last couple segments here are revolving around the playoffs a little bit more. In this next segment, we're going to talk about the playoff teams that were eliminated this past weekend in the wild card round, looking at 6 teams here that need improvements, obviously, to make a deeper run, and we're going to point them out and just talk about them. Where could each of the teams that were eliminated in the wild card round this past weekend, where can they improve, and what it could mean for them, in this next coming year if they address those positions. So we'll be right back with that. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.